I'm not registered anywhere because I travel too much to be registered anywhere. And everywhere I love it. I organize writing retreats, and then there's like 4, 5, 6 people joining me for a week. And I help them to write their book in a week, or at least a big part of their book in a week. And all the tips that I have learned, that I've used, and that I've helped so many people with, I'm going to share with you today. So Sue and I discussed, in order to talk about the marketing or promotion of your book, first, you need to make sure that you have a good book, because you can do perfect marketing for a bad book, and then, you know, people may buy it, but they leave bad reviews and they'll never buy anything from you again. On the other hand, you can write the best book, but if you don't do any marketing and promotion, nobody will know that the book exists. The single most frequently made mistake by writers is to only start a promotion when their book is finished. So if you stop watching the webinar now, if this is the only thing you learn, is to start your promotion like really, really early and do your promotion in a different way. And we'll get to that in a little bit. I'm going to share my screen to show you what I mean by reverse writing, because most people write their book like the traditional way, as you can see here. You start writing, you're really enthusiastic, and you go like crazy. You start writing all the things you've had in your mind for a long time, and then at some point you get stuck. What happens to a lot of people is that their document ends up in the trash, or somewhere in a computer file, or in a closet, or in a drawer, whatever, and they don't want to look at it again. And others go through the excruciating process of rewriting, going back, having to rewrite again, restructure, and then finally, sometimes there's a book. Does that sound familiar? Now, I have gone through this process as well, and I thought, can't we do it easier? And we can, because this is the reverse writing process. Let's see if I can get it visible. Here, we start, of course, with book idea. And before we do anything else, we look for a good title. That means looking at other books in that area, going to Amazon, looking at competitors, seeing what words they use, seeing what words you use when you Google about your subject. And when you have a good title and a subtitle, that's like one of the things your book already exists. Then we compose the back cover text, because what do you do when you go to a bookstore? You get a book, you read the back cover, or you go to Amazon and you go to the blurb, you read the summary of what the book is about. And the back cover, it's just one page, but it may be the most important page of your book, because it's your summary, it's your sales talk, it's your tone of voice, it's your promise to your readers, and it's the sender, like who the book is from. Are you an expert? Did you experience this yourself? Who are you? What is your expertise? So with the back cover, you can already start promoting your book. You can offer it for pre-sale. You can send it to a publisher. And you can get feedback on your back cover. Is this something you want to read? What are you missing? So you can already get in touch with your potential readers. But the back cover has something else that's really important. If you make a promise to your readers, I'll offer you 7 steps to something, or the 15 tips to do something, or the most frequently made mistakes in whatever, you already know what the body of your book is going to look like, because you need to address those 7 steps, or those 15 tips, or those 4 areas. So if your back cover is your guide to create your outline and your table of content, then you are sure that you're going to meet the promise that you make to your readers. And of course, your front cover is also important, because next to the back cover, the front cover is what most people see of your book. And a mistake that a lot of writers make is that they try to put too much on the cover. Like, for example, there's a story in your book, or a joke, or some inside information, and you try to put that on the cover, or you make it into a story. While most people see a book on their phone, and there's only space for a tiny little thumbnail. Also, when you go to Amazon, you see all the covers as a thumbnail. So that means your cover needs to jump out. Basically, it's a big title, as big as possible. a subtitle as big as possible, one image or a color or whatever, and then small your author name. There's no room for stories or artwork. Keep it simple, keep it clear, and keep it like really, really readable as a thumbnail. Now with these items, the title, the back cover, the front cover, your outline, you can start promoting your book. You can contact publishers, you can address you can start building a following, you can address the people that really need your book, the people with a certain disease or with a certain dream or whatever. And while you're doing that, you can start writing. Now, isn't that interesting that the writing is at the end and in all other things you start writing? And there's no getting stuck here, because if your back cover doesn't get the positive feedback from your following, you can change it. And the outline, you can still change. And it's much easier to move around bullet points than to move around big blocks of text. So this is my experience. And Sue, does it look familiar to you? Because you're also an author, and maybe you do this without knowing that I've called it reverse writing. Maybe it's something that's natural to you as well.
Yeah, and as a marketer, I like to get very clear as I'm writing. After I have the idea and know what I want to write, I want to know who I'm writing it to. So getting really clear about what is this book about? Writing a blurb is a fabulous tool to do that. And I'm also writing a mindset book right now where I'm vetting the outline with our audience.
Yeah, that's great, because marketing and promoting a book is not separate from writing the book. Often it's perceived that way, but it's the same as I'm in Miami right now. They're building lots of skyscrapers. Do you think that they build a skyscraper and then see if there's a market for it? No, first they make a design and they try to sell it already to people. First they have to sell it to the city, and then, you know, they have to find partners to do it. And they all do that based on like a blurb, a back cover, a sales brochure, with just a drawing of the skyscraper and a map of where it's going to be and the amenities it's going to offer, the target group. And they even start selling the apartments before they're ready. And we hardly ever do that with our books. To me, it happened as coincidence, actually. I was writing a book about becoming a digital nomad, about being kicked out of the Netherlands because I traveled too much. And I was almost finished with the book when I got into a car accident in the Caribbean. And I wrote to I got a whiplash. So I was out for a while. So I wrote to the people who bought my book already. I'm sorry, there's going to be a delay. I had this accident. You're going to get your money back if you want. But I must tell you that what I'm learning now about insurance, and I'm still fighting with the tax office, because I'm not publishing the book right now, that's all going to be included. And I had to write 5 of these emails because it took me 9 months before I was able to finish the book. But my audience had grown. Instead of people wanting their money back, they told me, oh, I really feel like an ambassador and I'm so excited for your book and all the extras you're going to put in the book. I'm sure it's going to be much better. And don't worry how long it takes. I'll just wait for the book. And that's such a different experience than what I had thought. You know, if you cannot deliver the date that you told people, everybody will want their money back. No, because they're interested in the topic and you're collecting more information and tips that they can benefit from. And I communicated with them, and communication is the single most important thing. Whether you do it through email, social media, or other channels, if you communicate with your readers and not just one-way sending, but real communication, you create like a relationship. And there's so much more that is possible. And one more thing about the reverse writing before I think it's logical to slowly go into the promotion, because it's so integrated into this whole process. When I wrote my first book with the Netherlands' biggest publisher, I had just started and they told me, well, we're going to make the brochure for the bookstores, because we always present one season before we present a brochure to the bookstores and they choose what books they're going to buy. So can you write the back cover of your book? And I was like, me? Write the back cover? Doesn't the publisher do that? And they said, well, we cannot do it because you know what your book is about. We don't. So you write it in the third person as if the publisher writes it. And of course, we can help you and we can edit it, but you have to write it because you know what your book is about. And I was like, okay, wow, that's completely new to me. I wrote the back cover. They created a cover for the book, and then they made a 3D model, and it looked like the book was already there. And first of all, to me, it was very motivating. Like, what? I'm still writing and the book already exists. So for me, it was really motivating. It made it real. And second, the bookstores also thought that the book already existed, and they liked the cover, they liked the blurb, and they said, okay, I'm going to buy it. So the publisher already knew that they were going to sell a few thousand books. And that also made the process a lot easier. And that's when I realized, wow, you can already start selling a book when you just have the cover and the back cover. So those were my experiences, and this is my reverse writing process. I agreed with Sue that everybody in this call is actually going to get the book Reverse Writing and the workbook that I made. So you're going to receive the ebooks, so you can dive deeper into the reverse writing process if you want, and do the exercises in the workbook to bring you step by step closer to publishing your book. But if you have any questions now, you can put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can open your microphone. Carrie says, thank you for the book. You're welcome. I'm happy to share. And it can also be adapted to fiction. Like for a fiction book, you wouldn't write like the clue on the back cover, but you would write the storyline on the back cover. And instead of making chapters with like a topic, you would probably make a storyline with scenes. But it really helps also for a fiction book to make that structure first. And if you have the structure, then you can follow your energy instead of following the page numbers. So if you have inspiration to write a certain scene or to write a certain whatever in your book, you can do that in chapter 7, and then you go back to chapter 3, and then you write the end, and then you write the beginning. So when you have a structure, which feels very unnatural in a creative process, within that structure, you can let your energy run free, and you can follow that energy and that creativity. And that really, really helps. Otherwise, you always have to keep in mind, where am I going? Is it going to fit? What did I promise? And working with the two halves of your mind at the same time is really confusing. So I found that it's better to separate it, create the structure first, and then let your creativity run. Let's see, what other questions do we have? Do you have anything to add, Sue, or shall we move on to the
I'll add a couple things, and we'll see if we have a couple more questions about this piece of it before I dive into book marketing. But with my traditionally published clients, you know, there have been supply chain issues in the past couple of years since the pandemic. And sometimes it's really heartbreaking for authors when they hear that their publish date has been pushed out, right? And I'm always like, it's not a problem. Like from a marketing perspective, you want more time. And at Pages and Platforms, I am always telling authors who ask constantly, when should I start marketing my book? I'm like, as soon as you know the kind of story that you're telling and who would want to read it, right? You are ready to do the marketing and you're ready to start building that audience now. People are going to be so eager to get their book, your book, in their hands. So having your pub date pushed from my marketing perspective is never a problem. And I always wish that writers had started sooner than they did.
Yes. There are some questions. Marlene asked, did I publish myself? My first 3 books were published by the Netherlands' biggest author, and I'm eternally grateful to them for their trust, for the advance that I got, for what they did. I learned a lot from it, but also I learned that I would rather self-publish, because a big publisher is big and slower, and they have departments with some good people and some not so good people. So I was used as an entrepreneur, I'm used to doing everything myself, and especially the marketing. And I think the more personal I can make it, the better it works. But of course, publishers have a lot of advantages as well. So I always say, do the 2-track strategy. You prepare to self-publish, but in the meantime, you approach a few publishers and you write a proposal, a book proposal for those publishers. And doing that research and writing the book proposal really, really helps with your own marketing and launching of your book. You dive into competition, into your target market, how to reach them. You research your own visibility, your own platforms. So I would do the two tracks, and then you can choose, hopefully, what you want to do. Gretchen asked if I can say more about the components of a great back cover summary. That's a good question. The back cover is not an executive summary. Executive summaries are very logical, but often a bit boring. And even if you make a good summary of your book, you often miss the connection with your readers. So what I would do in the first paragraph, I would try to make a connection with your reader, either by asking a good question, or by talking about their desired situation, or by talking about the pain that they have, the situation they want to get out of. For example, do you suffer from burnout? That's the pain situation, the situation that they want to get rid of. Do you wake up each morning without a lot of energy? And then you talk about the desired situation. How would it be if, you could jump out of bed every morning and have a lot of energy? And then, of course, you need to bridge what gets people from the situation they're in now to the desired situation. That's your method, the reverse writing method, or the whatever, the meditation, or so in some way you need to talk about the pain, the solution, and how to get there. But of course, you're not going to do that in this like boring structural way. You can do it with a quote from your book, with a scene from your book, in asking questions. You can make bullets with the most frequently made mistakes, or with, the things that people want to achieve. But those are elements that need to go in every back cover. Then another thing is, it's best to focus on the results that people will get from reading this book. So you make a promise to your readers, but don't talk too much about the process. They will find that out in the book. What they want to know is the results. After reading this book or using this method, you will be able to do, learn, feel, know. Your relationship will be 15% better. You'll be able to write your book faster, something like that. So it's not the reverse writing method is blah, 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 blah. That's something people will find out in the book. But as a result of the reverse writing method, you'll be able to write a better book, make more connection with your readers, start promotion earlier, sell more books, whatever, something like that. So think about the results. And then you need to talk about the author. And I have a nice example for you. Imagine that you're reading a book to get a better relationship. So it has relationship advice. And it's one book, it's exactly the same book, but we have 5 different authors. So what if you read about the author that this book is written by a religious person, like a pastor, or however, I don't know exactly how you call them, but like a 60-year-old pastor from a church who has never been married, but who approaches relationships from a religious perspective. That gives you an idea of the book. So the blurb is the same, the book is the same, but the few lines about the author give you a certain idea about the book. Now, what if this book was written by a 17-year-old girl? Again, a completely different perspective. What if it was written by a relationship therapist? Again, a different perspective. What if it was written by Oprah Winfrey or by Deepak Chopra? Then it becomes a spiritual book. So the few lines about the author need to make people aware who you are. And we don't want your whole CV, but things that add to the blurb of your book. So if you're writing about a spiritual topic, it could be very useful that you mention that you're a scientist, because it means you're not floating out there, but you also have your feet on the ground and you know science, but still you write about a spiritual topic. Or if you're writing about time management and you mention about the author part that you're a mother of 4 kids, you have a busy job at one of the big 5 companies and you do volunteer work in your free time. Then people know that you know how to manage time, and I want to know how you do it, and I want to read your book about time management. And don't forget to put a call to action on your back cover. For example, a URL, a website address, or something else that people who want to know more, they know where to go. And all together, now this is fun, your back cover, your blurb should not be more than 250 words, maximum 300 words. Because you also need an author photo on the back cover. You need the barcode, the ISBN, things like that. So you don't have space for more than 250, maximum 300 words. So you talk about the problem you're going to solve, the ideal situation, something about the results, promise to your readers, about the author, an author photo, and a call to action, a website. That's a long answer to a short question.
It was great, though. That was really well fleshed out. The next couple questions in here, I think, are best answered during the course of talking about book marketing, but let me hop ahead here to one more for you. Gretchen says, have you used the same approach for essay writing? I can see a fit here for any kind of significant content.
Yes, I think it's the same. Even if you're writing like a thesis or a screenplay, like I said, for building a skyscraper, you start with the executive summary, and it's not just an executive summary, it's a promise, it's your tone of voice. That's one thing I forgot about the back cover, by the way, and also for essays and other things. If your book is very funny, then don't write on the back cover, the book is very funny, but write your back cover in a very funny tone of voice so that people will laugh out loud and they will think, hey, that's funny. If you want to say that your book is written in a very, I don't know, a certain style, short sentences, or in poems or whatever, write your back cover in that way. So don't explain, but let people experience your tone of voice on the back cover. And that's the same for essay writing. Give people a taste for what they're going to read. Make a short summary or intro paragraph or whatever, because people want to know what they're getting into. The same thing, a sales page for a product, or the homepage of your website, or the sales page for an e-course. People need to know what they're getting into. Show them your tone of voice. Make them a promise that you're going to deliver. Connect with them on what they're struggling with and what you're going to solve for them. So don't make it just ascending, but make this connection between what they need, what you have to offer, and how you're going to offer it. What is your unique take in this?
Absolutely. Okay, so I think that's a great segue. I'd like to talk for a little bit about a fundamental strategy for book marketing that's really, really simple to understand and is also really customizable, right? You can make it your own with all of these core pieces. But first, I want to address, both Esther and I have used the word marketing. Sometimes writers get a little cringy when they hear that they have to market. But the reality is that in our current publishing culture, even if you're being traditionally published, you still have to do the heavy lifting of marketing yourself, right? So the sooner we sort of stop resisting that, the better. And the sooner we find a way into it that is really appealing to us, the better. So the first thing I'd like to do is give you a different definition of marketing, right? So you don't even have to call it marketing. If you don't want to, you can call it building relationships with your readers, right? That is what we are trying to do. We're trying to build long-lasting relationships with readers who are some of the most awesome people in the world, right? Who wouldn't want to have, people who are thirsty for knowledge, who are thirsty for stories, as someone that they're having a relationship with. So that is the attitude that I want you to take as you think about getting your books out into the world through marketing. So the system that I use is a 4-part system. It's called the connection system, and it was developed by the mentor who trained me in book marketing. His name's Tim Grawl. And really it's a content marketing framework, but it's specifically designed for authors. How many of you, tell me in the chat, if you are really worried about growing your social media following as part of being an author? Tell me in the chat if social media is something you think you need to do, something that kind of
You can
makes you a
also
little
raise
bit
your
nervous.
hands so we
You
can
can raise your
see.
hand if you're on camera. Yep.
A lot of writers feel that's like,
Yeah.
ooh, that's a big thing.
Right. So the good news is that social media actually doesn't sell books very well at all. The current exception to that is TikTok, but that there's only a certain kind of reader that's on TikTok. So I don't want you to invest a ton of time in growing a social media following. If it happens to happen organically, fantastic. But your number one goal is to develop an email list of subscribers, right? This has a number of advantages over social media. Number one, you have much more control over that list of people on your list, and they have control as well. They can leave anytime they want to, and that's fine. We want them to be able to leave if they're not invested in what we have to say. It can't be taken away from us by Mark Zuckerberg or anyone else who runs a social media platform. And social media is like drinking from a fire hose. And even if you build, people are in scroll mode on social media, right? They're not in book buying mode. They're not shopping for books by being on social media, right? And when you have, let's say you are fortunate enough that you've grown an audience of 100,000 followers on social media, anytime you send out a post, nowhere near 100,000 of your followers are going to see any one particular post. And then when they do, the chances of them actually clicking through a link to buy your book is very, very small. Engagement rates on social media are like 1% and less. Engagement rates on email of people who open and interact with your email are more like 30%, right? So 1% or less, or 30% or more. Which one would you rather do? Right? So your number one goal, the first piece of the 4-part strategy, is to have that goal of building an email list. Especially if you're writing one book and that's all you're ever going to do, not quite as important for you. But if you want to write more than one book, Esther's written 30 books. Esther's got an email list, right? So she can reach her people again and again and again. If they enjoyed one book of Esther's, they're much more likely to want the next book of Esther's, and they want to know when it's going to come out. So that's number one. Number two is you need to have content. So content is anything that you are putting out into the world that gives people a sense of who you are and what you're writing and how it can help them, right? So content can be your blog, it can be your newsletter, it can be just the words that are coming out of your mouth if you go on a podcast or if you go speak at an event, right? Content is that grocery store sample. Grocery store samples are back. We didn't have them for a few years, but I've seen them again, right? When you go to the grocery store and you're thinking of buying a new product, often they will have a table set up and you can try the blue corn tortilla chip before you put the bag of corn tortilla chips in your cart, right? It's the same thing for authors. We need to be putting free content out in the world so that readers can evaluate if you are the right author for them, if they want more of that or not. So very, very helpful to put content out there, and it builds that relationship, right? It puts you in a position where you're not just asking for their dollars to buy your book. You are in a position to give them whatever it is that is going to help meet a need that they have. So that's the second part. We've got email list and we have content that needs to be put out into the world. The third part is the magic ingredient. And when I talk to a new author who I may be potentially working with, and they're like, hey, I have an email list, but it's just not growing, or I have books, but they're just not selling, I ask the question, okay, what kind of outreach are you doing? And what I mean by outreach is you finding a way to go out to an audience of people who are filled with the kind of people who would like your book, and you get in front of them instead of waiting for them to sort of stumble into your digital spider web of your website or your social media account or whatever it is, right? You don't wait for people to find you. You know who you're looking for. You know who would love your book. Outreach means that you go out and you try to get in front of audiences that are already filled with that kind of person. So that is outreach. That is where 90% of authors go wrong. they're just blogging and they're making their newsletter content and they're investing a ton of energy, and then they're very frustrated and sad because it doesn't seem to be doing anything. We need all of these pieces. And I'll talk about how they work together in a minute. We've got one more piece to go through. So we've got our email list, we have content, we have outreach, and then the final piece is selling, right? These are the last two pieces are the ones where most writers at least have a little bit of discomfort, and some of us have a lot of discomfort, right? Because getting out into the world in front of audiences means I might get rejected, I might get ignored. Yeah, you definitely will. You have to in order to get to the yeses. And then selling is, I don't want to be the sleazy used car salesperson, right? Nobody wants to be that person, because we all bring our worst examples of marketing to the word when we hear it. So my favorite story about selling is I was talking to a client. She is writes children's books from picture books through middle grade. She's very, very talented. She's probably written 9-10 books in this category, traditionally published. And she said, but I've always been really mid-list. I've never really had a hit because I really hate selling. I was like, okay. And we chatted a little bit more. And then we kind of went down a conversational side road. And we both happened to live in Portland, Oregon. And I was complaining that I couldn't get any of my friends to go to karaoke with me, right? I couldn't get anyone to go sing with me. And she flipped out. We were on Zoom together. She's like, Sue, do you know about Low Bar Corral? And I was like, what is Low Bar Corral? She's like, oh, you have to go. It's in Revolution Hall and there's a live band and everybody just shows up and sings all together at once. You have to try it. You have to try it. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. I'll try it. And then I was like, time out, Melissa, guess what you're doing? You're selling me on Low Bar Corral, right? And the reason you're comfortable selling me on Low Bar Corral is because you learned something about me that guarantees that this would add value to my life, right? You're doing me a favor by selling me hard on Low Bar Corral because you know that I would love it, right? So that is the missing ingredient often in our marketing and in our selling, is we're not talking to that right person in a way that proves that this is the right book for them. So you have to believe that about your book, and you have to find the person who that's true for. And that's not going to be everybody. And that's okay. You don't need it to be everybody, right? But you can sell really hard from a place of like love and enthusiasm when you have that match, when you know your book would be absolutely perfect for this person for this reason. And that's the kind of thing you want to communicate in your marketing, in your back cover blurb, right? All of those things. You want to pretend like you're talking to that specific person.
And I think on top of that, it's a lot of writers feel uncomfortable putting themselves in the spotlight. And I always say that you're not putting yourself in the spotlight, but you're writing this book about a topic that you have struggled with and that you know other people are struggling with. So you are not writing it for look at me, but you're writing it to help other people. And if you can help other people by sharing your story and by letting them know that this is available, then you're not selling and you're not putting yourself in the spotlight, you're helping other people. And we all love to help other people. So it's a completely different way of looking at this.
Yep, 100%, totally agree. So those are the 4 pieces, and let me show you how they work out in the world in action. And you can, there's so many permutations of this, right? I'm going to give you a couple of examples, but you can come up with your own examples that suit your book and your ideal reader, right? So the 4 pieces are, you're going to build an email list, you're going to be putting out content, you're going to do outreach by getting in front of somebody else's audience that's full of people who would love your book, and then you're going to sell them. You're going to sell them on joining your email list, and you're going to sell them your book, right? And that does not have to be like a hard, gross, yucky sell. This is like you are helping, right? Writing a book is putting value into the world. It is an act of service, period. If every writer went on strike tomorrow, the world would feel it immediately, right? Our world would be depleted and degraded because all writers would go on strike. You are adding value to the world. You don't need to, get wrapped up in I don't want to put myself out there. Who do I think I am? All of that is like, it's a bunch of crap. Okay. But how do you use this system once it's all these 4 pieces are in place? So the first step is just prerequisite, get that email list set up. So there are forms on your website where people can join your email list. Now you want to mark that, don't just say sign up for news and updates, because nobody cares about our news and updates. Remember, Esther said, tell them what the benefit is. Tell them what they're going to end up with by the end of the book, right? So you're going to tell them what they're going to gain by being on the newsletter. What's the benefit to the newsletter? What are they going to learn? What are they going to share? How are they going to be entertained? But there's some setup to that, right? There's a little bit of tech. You have to get an email service provider and you have to put the forms up on your website. That's set it and forget it. Once it's done, it's going to work for you for years. Then you're going to go out into the world and do your outreach. You've got to know who you're looking for. You've got to know your ideal reader. You go out into the world, find that audience. In the course of doing that, you will be delivering content of some kind. And then the selling part is you will give them a call to action to come back and join your newsletter so that you have many opportunities to share helpful information and to ask them to buy your books. So that could look like pitching a podcast that you know your ideal reader would listen to, right? So the pitching is outreach. You're pitching to get on that podcast to a whole new audience of people. When you talk on that podcast with the host and are being interviewed, that is the content that you're delivering. And then you will do that call to action to invite them back over to your email list. And then you'll have many opportunities to sell them your book once they're on your email list, right? So that's a podcast. You could write book reviews yourself. That's content. You could put those book reviews up on your website, right? That's the content piece. But in the process of doing that, you are going to tag the author of the person who wrote the book. 9 times out of 10, that's free publicity for that author. So they're going to share it with their audience. That's where outreach comes into play in that specific scenario. At the end of your content, you have a call to action to join your newsletter. So that's pulling them back over to your email list. And then you have multiple opportunities to sell them your book, right? So that's just 2 examples. You can do live examples of going to conferences for your outreach. You can do paid advertising for your outreach. There are so many creative options out there. You can find something that will work for your budget, that will work for your particular talents, that will work for you whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, right? You just have to be committed to filling out this 4-part system in a way that is going to speak to your ideal reader and that's going to feed you as an author.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
Because some subjects that you're writing about have an additional possibility, and that it is that your target group is easy to reach. For example, if you write about a specific disease, there are often patient groups that get together, that have like a forum, a website, a newsletter, maybe even a conference that the hospitals refer to. And if you write something that is specific for a certain group with a certain disease or for a family of people with a certain affection, then that is very specific, a group that you can target and reach. You can target all women between 30 and 40, which is a very clear target group, but it's more difficult to reach them. So people with a specific disease, for example, there are red hair days where all people with red hair physically get together. So if this is your target group, you're writing about styling for people with red hair or whatever, you could physically go to this conference, your target group will be physically there. If you're writing for, I don't know, people with anything, I don't know, a book about dentist jokes, then you can reach all the dentists because they have a professional organization. You can also target everybody who has a family member who's a dentist because they will want to buy this book to give like as a present or dentist jokes or whatever. So think about not only the email targeting, but also where do your target group gets together physically or on a forum in an association where you can easily reach them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Esther's going to be giving you her reverse writing book. I'm going to be sending you an ideal reader workshop. It's pre-recorded, so you can watch it and learn how to create your ideal reader. Because once you know who that is, you can find all of those places out in the world where your ideal readers are congregating, right? Whether it's in person or it's virtual. So you'll be getting that sometime, probably this evening or tomorrow. I am cruising in here for questions. Let's open it up. If anyone has any questions right now, can you just put a Q in front of a question that you would like Esther or I to answer, as opposed to the other chatter that will help us wade through, but we can spend the last 15 minutes here answering any questions you have.
If I can add something while we're waiting for the questions, I completely agree with Sue that an email list is very important. My personal experience is that social media can also add to that. It can get people on your list. It can keep you visible. It can make it more personal. You can share tips. But my advice would be not to focus on building a social media presence, like getting onto a platform that you're not on yet, but instead using the platform that you already know and like. So if you're on LinkedIn, use that to post tips, frequently asked questions, to ask for feedback and things like that. If you're on Instagram, use that. So don't force yourself to learn new technology and put a lot of effort into new platform, but do make sure that you're visible and your expertise and your subject are visible. And things that are very normal to you are probably very useful to people outside of your circle. So if you're a dietitian and you give tips to people who want to lose weight every day, then, you know, the most frequently asked questions to you are like, oh, again, this question. But if people keep asking them, it's knowledge that you have and that others don't. So if you are on a social media platform, why don't you post every day a frequently asked question that somebody asked you that day? You probably answered it through email, and why don't you use that email copy also to put it on LinkedIn or Instagram or in a blog or whatever? So use all the little things that you do every day, the conversations you have, and turn that into content instead of sitting down and having to create something big.
Yep, that's beautiful. Nina asks, how do you ask famous people to review your book? Our publisher said that one famous author asked quite a lot of money to do this. And Esther, you're welcome to weigh in too. I can go first on this one. So most of my clients who are traditionally published, when you're seeing author blurbs, that author already has a connection to the person who's doing the blurb in many, many, many cases. If you have a publisher in common, you don't know that author, but you have a publisher in common, sometimes your publisher can pull the string so that the author is more likely to say yes because you both share a publisher. It's not impossible. I don't like to say anything is impossible, but if you don't have any prior relationship with someone who has quite a bit of name recognition, it's much, much more difficult to get them to review your book, because guess what? Everyone is asking for them to review the book, and asking someone to review a book is actually a very big ask, because you're asking them to read the whole book and then think of something to say about it. The other best kept secret about blurbs is usually the author is the one writing the blurbs and passing it to the influencer to sign off or modify or tweak, right?
Right, because most people don't even read the whole book.
Read them.
They read the back cover, the table of content, maybe a few lines to see if it's their style, and they want to make sure that the person is authentic and like real. And I agree with Sue, don't approach somebody you don't know. But you can also use a different strategy. If your book is about, I don't know, a disease that your child has, and you know a famous person who also has a child with that disease, you can approach them and say, listen, you've experienced the same thing as I have. I have written a book with tips for mothers like us. And I would really appreciate it if you could say something about your experience, about the subject, about this book, about the approach that I offer, so that we together can help more mothers. It's not you are going to help me make more money, because that's not something that appeals to people. But if they are ambassador of a charity with the same cause as what you're writing about, you have a better chance that they will connect. And this is also where social media comes in. Before you ask people for a favor, you can already connect to them. You can follow them, you can learn about them, you can send them a message or a compliment or ask them a question. And when they're receptive and you build a relationship, then it's easier to ask them something than just to barge in and say, hey, read this book, write me a review.
Yes, and that just goes to our argument of the sooner you start marketing and building your audience, the better, because you have time to foster those relationships in time before the book comes out, so that you can foster a relationship that could lead to a blurb. And reciprocation is so important. Yeah.
You could do the same thing with journalists. If you want to be featured in a certain magazine or a radio show or whatever, start to follow the journalist, not just one, but many, and read what they're writing about your subject and give them feedback. Oh, I really loved your article about this and this and this. And what I really liked was this, but what I kind of missed was this perspective. Are you also going to write about this perspective? And then you build a relationship with them. And then a few months later, you say, oh, by the way, I'm working on a book and it has this perspective and it builds perfectly on the article you wrote 3 months ago. Would you be interested to review it? Or can I send you a sample? So it's really online marketing or building a network is really the same as in real life. You don't just walk up to somebody and say, do you want to do this? No, you build a relationship. First, you make eye contact, you say hi, you chit chat a little bit, you ask them questions. And then when you find a common point, you can dive deeper. This is also how it works online.
Yeah, and that, in my opinion, is the best use of social media, not to build a huge following, but to interact with potential influencers and build those relationships, right? To actually be social on social media instead of constantly just pushing out content that says, hey, buy my book.
And I can advise everybody to become a member of HARO, Help a Reporter Out, because that's where reporters post requests for people who have changed their lives, people who suffer from a certain disease, people, experts on every imaginable subject. So it's free. You just get on the mailing list of HARO or the website, even haro.com. And it's very, very useful also to learn how to bend your subject to fit a question that may be about something completely different. So be creative to maneuver yourself into the spotlight for different journalists.
Absolutely. Linda says, what is the best email list tool that I can use on a WordPress site? So you can use almost any email service provider will work with WordPress. Basically, you're going to use that email service provider and it will talk to WordPress through code and through API, right? So they can either talk to each other, or your email service provider will give you a little chunk of code that you can go put on your WordPress site. So it's not like WordPress is going to limit you in any way. That said, the tools that I like the best for writers are MailerLite and ConvertKit are the two tools that I like the best. Esther, if you have any that you like to plug, feel free to do that.
I know MailChimp offers like the first few hundred subscribers for free. And it's very simple, easy to use. So I would add that to your list as well, MailChimp, and see if that is what you're looking for.
Awesome. Grant says, what should I know about building content and getting it out there? I think I'm overly concerned about putting out content that will later be part of a book or similar, and this is having a negative effect on the final product. I've had people tell me that no one's going to read my blog anyway, but I keep finding excuses for not getting stuff out there in the meantime. Great question for Esther.
Yes, I would keep it small. I would keep it very close to yourself, and I would keep it very everyday-like. Often I notice when you want to write something big and good that it's going to take a long time, you're not really motivated, and probably nothing is ever going to get published. But if you had to write something now about something that happened today, one thing that you learned from this webinar, or one conversation you've had today, or something you've noticed, a website, a book, a conversation, a tip you gave to a client, that's easy to write down. You do it in 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has that energy that people are going to feel. And a lot of these mini posts also may be content for your book. And at least you get them out there when you keep it small and you keep it like daily stuff instead of making it very big. So I would turn it around and start to write something really, really small and easy about something that you gave to people today, like a piece of added value, advice, a tip, a joke, an inspirational quote, something that affected you or somebody else today.
Fantastic. Gretchen says, it's taken me a long and slow time to get over 1,000 on my email list. Jane Friedman says that's a good number for an indie author. However, I want that number to double, and I've tried things that haven't moved the needle quickly. Any new ideas for this, especially with a new book coming out in June? Esther, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I wouldn't get too hung up on numbers. I mean, if you have 1,000 people already, that's great, because those people are exactly your target group. And maybe you could ask those people, like, if I don't know, you can recommend somebody who can receive my next book for free, and people will add people to your mailing list. But I wouldn't get too hung up on numbers. Actually, I would really engage the people that you have and ask them for feedback, ask them for help, ask them to refer you, and give them something in return. Maybe that's an approach that appeals to you.
And the more outreach that you can do of any kind, and then you're directing them back to the newsletter, is the secret to list growth always. When I see someone who does not have a list growing, they're not putting in the commensurate amount of outreach in one end to get subscribers out the other, right? So it's a rinse and repeat process.
And another tip for your newsletter: a newsletter is not what have I been up to in the last 3 months. That's not what your readers want to see. It's the same thing about your book. They want added value. They want something that helps them. So either pick a certain theme or share the problems that your clients have had that you have solved, how you have solved them. So you start with a problem and you give a solution, but it's not, I found 3 clients, I did these projects. That doesn't interest anybody, anything. Look for the added value and the connection with your readers, a problem they have, or some inspiration that you can give them.
Yeah, absolutely. Linda asks, what kind of info would you share with people on the mailing list? And Esther just spoke to that. Another thing that I will say is, when you know your ideal reader and who that person is, it answers the question, right? If you were going out to coffee with your ideal reader, what would you talk about, right? You'd tailor the conversation to have an interesting conversation with that person. So that's why it's so important to get clear on who is the ideal reader for your book, because it helps you make all of these marketing decisions.
Yeah, with one of your reader target groups, you would talk about, books about this subject, and with others you would talk about food, and with others you would talk about other people, and the problems they have and how you could solve them. So with every friend you have a different relationship, and with every target reader group you will also have a different conversation.
Absolutely. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more. Nina says, I'm planning on posting the big smile book deal signing picture on LinkedIn and my site 3 months before the launch. Is that a good timeline? This is one of those things that you don't really need to get hung up on. There's no perfect timing. I think you need to look at that particular piece of content, right? In the system that I just talked about, that's a piece of content, right? Like, yay, I'm so excited I have a book deal. Think about that within the context of all of the other activities that you're going to do for the launch, so that you can kind of keep things flowing and keep exciting things happening and keep adding value for the reader, rather than this one thing, what is the exact time for that to go?
Yeah, and if I can add something to that, to be honest, the book signing deal, it's interesting for you and it's interesting for people who know you. Right. But for people who are interested in your book topic, it doesn't give them any added value. So I would separate, or I would think about your promotion in 3 areas. First, it's personal, your personal writing process. So even before posting this book signing deal, why don't you write about like, oh, I'm going to do it. It's very scary, but I'm going to write this book. And this is what it's going to be about, your back cover, your title. And then when after a few of these posts, you get a book deal, people are your ambassador. Like, wow, she started a few months ago and she was insecure about it. Now she's got a book deal. So then it becomes a story. Storytelling is really important. So one thing you can talk about is your personal writing process with ups and downs and the things you learn and milestones. That's interesting for people who know you. It's interesting for other people writing a book, and it gives like a person behind the book. The second thing is your theme or topic. You are an expert in a certain topic, or people have a problem with a certain thing, and you can share frequently asked questions, frequently made mistakes, tips, do's and don'ts, like content, really content about your topic, about dieting or about a disease or about parenting, whatever it is. And the third topic you can write about in your publicity is the book itself. What color should I choose for the cover? You know, this is the publishing date. Who should I interview for the book? I've been approached by 2 publishers. Which one fits best? And you notice that I ask a lot of questions because that's a way to interact with your audience. So those are the 3 things that I usually look at in publicity. And for just the personal part, you can make hundreds of posts or blogs or newsletter entries. For your topic, your subject, you can make thousands because that's what your book is about. Every paragraph, every chapter, everything is already a social media post. Every website you look at, every book you read, quotes, lyrics, you know, anything about your topic, jokes, cartoons, you can use for this. And the third one is your book itself. And that's, you know, you talk about the milestones of your books, you ask for the milestones of the writing process, you ask for feedback, you can share your successes. So I hope that helps a little bit to mine into these endless possibilities of content.
Yes. And thank you everyone so much for coming. We are out of time, but it was a delight to have you here. You'll get 2 emails, one from Esther with a way
The
to
reverse
get
writing book and the workbook.
And then you'll get one from us that will have the reader persona webinar and also send out the replay of this webinar as well. So thanks everyone for coming. We're so excited to see your books come out into the world. So go out there and get them.